I am reviewing Speaking as a Leader by Judith Humphrey, and to be fair, this book seems to be directed a little bit more at a corporate audience than a creative audience, but I do think that there are a couple of very useful points, and I've pulled out the best of them for you. So the first is that every opportunity we have to speak is an opportunity to persuade and to influence. A lot of the time, if we are in technical fields, sometimes we get stuck in jargon and information, and speaking can become an information dump where we just put a lot of facts and numbers and frameworks and just information and try to fill the heads of the people who we're speaking to. But actually, every single act of communication, there should be some type of call to action. So whether that's to get somebody to change their mind, to make a different decision, to think differently of you and your team, whatever it is, it needs to be an argument and not topics, right? You're not talking about something, you're trying to create a shift and a transformation in someone's mind. And so in order to do that, you really have to identify what the message, the core message is in anything that you're saying. And one of the benefits of being able to come up with a core message is that your talk and its structure can actually scale, right? Here's your core message. This introduces your message. This supports your message. Here's the call to action, right? That's their kind of basic leadership script, their speaking script, which if you're interested in checking it out, I recommend. It's a very, very simple, almost kind of straightforward, common sense script. But if you really know what your message is, if you have 30 seconds, your leadership script and structure can scale to, here's the core point, here's one reason why, vote for me, or make this choice on this project. Whereas if you have a lot more time to speak about it, you can actually have a much more complex argument with multiple points of support. So that's the first thing, and it's in some ways a no-brainer if communication is a passion of yours. But sometimes as we move forward in our careers and we gain more expertise, we forget to take off the expert hat. So the second point is about how to speak with energy. Energy is persuasive. Energy gets people excited. Energy is everything from body language, right? Using our hands, using our voice, modulating our voice. And I specifically want to zero in on what they call energy words. So when we speak with energy, what we say matters, right? What we emphasize in a given sentence changes the meaning of that sentence. So your message, your key arguments, and your call to action should be things that you say with more emphasis and more conviction, right? If you're reading off, let's say your talk was written out, you don't want to read it all in the same monotone. You don't want to just modulate, you actually want to use your modulation to emphasize your point. And so they even go further to talk about how energy words, right, specific words can actually be tied to your message. So if the example they give is if you're talking about some type of growth plan for your company or your campaign, you might emphasize words like reach and growth and expansion because they help use your voice to underline your point. So pausing is also really important. Pausing creates emphasis. And I think specifically for women, sometimes we're worried about taking up someone's time. Do I really have a right to, have everyone listen to me for as long as it takes to get the point across? And when we try to rush to get the point across faster so that people can go on with their lives, we actually lose the opportunity to create impact and influence, because if we think it's not worth spending some time on hearing what we have to say, it's hard to have our audience buy into the fact that it's worth their time. Okay, so another piece that I thought was really interesting and useful is they talk about how to lead from below. So we're at different places in our careers. Some of us are leading in some cases and following in other cases. Leading from below is a really core skill, and I think sometimes women specifically will wait for permission to lead, but we really need to learn how to develop leadership skills even when we're working under people. And so here's what they say. First of all, when we're leading from below, sometimes we tend to apologize or qualify what we're about to say, right? This will only take a few minutes. And so we don't want to be tentative. We also don't want to be defensive, right? So sometimes we're convinced that the person who is supervising us or who has the power to make a decision is already gonna shoot us down, and so we go in defensively, so we don't want to do that. Sometimes I call this, walking the middle path between submissiveness and defensiveness. And instead what we want to do is be really direct. We want to get to the point really quickly, don't have all of this qualifying stuff for why we need to be there, right? The people who are supervising us oftentimes have limited amount of time, and so you just want to get to the point really quickly. And then you also want to be bold. You want to use strong language that expresses why you think something is a course of action, right? If you're just presenting information, take a stand, right? It's not just a dump of information. These are the three options. This is the one I think is the right one for this reason. And they can agree or disagree with you, but being able to express a bold conviction and boldness, right? Not wavering on your language is a way of expressing leadership power, and it helps you move through the ranks. And then finally, they talk about how to use words specifically to express power and how to get rid of what they call qualifying language. So many of you have probably heard about qualifying language, right? Saying, I'm sorry, or I just want to get this off my chest. But they add a couple more to the picture that I think are really helpful. So they talk about prefatory qualifiers. So just a thought, can I just get a couple words in there, right? When we start our statement with that tentative speech pattern, it already makes someone not want to believe us. They also talk about mincing modifiers, right? It's kind of necessary. I just wanted to say, sort of, right? What they call wiggle words. So probably, roughly, about, right? Being like giving ourselves a lot of wiggle room with our language expresses that we don't really know what we're talking about. And sometimes you don't know what you're talking about, but a lot of the time you know a lot more what you're talking about. You're just afraid to say it. So try it for a day, right? Don't use wiggle words and don't use modifiers for a day and see what happens. See how you feel. You can always go back and correct a statement later. Filler expressions, like, those are really hard to cut out. So case in point, if you do it, I just want to tell you, don't beat yourself up. Speaking slower is a way to stop using those filler words. And in formal settings, preparing your points ahead of time can help, and practicing ahead of time. Apologizing, right? I'm sorry, this will just take a few minutes, right? Sorry to take your time, but have we thought about this? And then self-correcting, right? So I could be wrong. I don't quite remember the statistic. Like, own it. About 50% of people do this. Okay, I just used a wiggle word, but a lot of the time when you think you're wrong, you might not be wrong. And then finally, they talk about trailing off. So using etc., so forth, dot, dot, dot. And part of why we do the trailing off is that our brain has already caught up, is already moving past our sentence and is moving on to the next sentence, right? It's left our mouth behind as it finishes up the sentence. But learning how to speak slower and with more confidence and with more gravity means that you actually commit to making the statement that you're making before you move on to the next sentence. And so learning how to do that, and again, giving yourself permission to slow down because someone else deserves to hear from you, is a way to do that. And focusing on how do I complete all of the sentences I start will help you speak with more power.